Hello my fellow hunters, in this video I gonna recommend you switch axes that you have to craft before getting Sunbreak, or I highly recommend to craft before. So if you are currently not in the meta, that's not a problem, because in Sunbreak the meta will completely change, because now we have a counter amp that means we got an insta amp if we perfectly time counter, and so we doesn't have to calculate with the ASU. Long version is amped state uptime, and now that means at the end of the day, in 99% of the cases the power files are stronger than the elemental files. There's one exception. Narga X will be still very strong and the strongest elemental file switch X in Sunbreak. And I also want to say thank you to everyone who watched this 2.5 hour stream. Currently it says 790 views, but in my data it says it's about 1300 views or so. I just recognized during the entire stream there was always about 50 viewers, so at the peak 59 viewers, and yes, 1200 views for a stream that was the stream that got the most attention. And like you can read in the title, yes, I only recommend this video if you want to have an in-depth view in all the Sunbreak weapon stats. So they are data mined, this is no leak or so, they are really every weapon from Sunbreak is completely data mined with all the stats, with all the sharpness crates. And in this video, calculated the CLST damage of a weapon without any power tolerance, power jump, without attack boost, without weakness exploit, just the general stats. And I made two conditions, one condition without elemental attack maxed out and a second condition with elemental attack maxed out, because this is an extremely huge difference. And also for some weapons you need only a few levels of handicraft to reach the next sharpness level. So in this video I try to get every weapon to the purple sharpness or the white sharpness. It isn't worth it for the handicraft levels, or the weapon just can't read the next sharpness level. Yes, okay, so I'm gonna put a link into the description to the spreadsheet and to the stream if you wanna have to see the exact data. So very roughly calculated pre-meta, so we currently can't really say anything. It's very hard to say how to handle with the new skills we get, and maybe a few weapons like the Gore Magala weapon maybe has an onboard skill. And also there's the next question, what happens with all the ramp up skills, because they will completely remove in Sunbreak the rampage skills like this one. They will be gone. So I didn't know if you previously crafted a switch axe and then upgraded into a Sunbreak version, if they're gonna remove this effect or if it stays. So that nobody knows. And I personally think they maybe remove it, because if they don't, all the vanilla weapons have a big advantage in comparison to the Sunbreak weapons, and that's why I think they completely get lost, the rampage skills. So just for information, if you wanna go from Rise into Sunbreak, it isn't really worth it to craft all the meta sets or stuff. I just recommend using the T-Rex switch X. Why the T-Rex switch X and not the Diablos X? I'm gonna explain it to you, because I highly recommend using the full Wildstruck's armor set. That gives you a huge amount of elemental resistance, also an extremely high damage boost. And yes, with Rex Knasher you have white sharpness, also blue sharpness. Maybe you didn't really read that protective polish, we will see. Just have to shop a few times more, but you can also play this weapon with protective polish if you have a PC version and get a very good charm. Yes, otherwise I just recommend wearing the full Wildstruck's armor set with a maxed out rapid move and maybe a few protective polish or razor sharp. Always recommend protective polish over razor sharp. And yes, this weapon is the weapon I recommend, yes, to get into Sunbreak, also because you get good KOs, great sharpness management, and yes, it didn't really worth it to prepare for the elemental builds, but you can use the elemental builds as well. They are pretty much stronger. I also just want to say, in base Rise, elemental switch X were about 20 up to 30% stronger than the power files, and now in Sunbreak the power files are absolute meta. Every power file weapon is stronger than elemental file, because yes, there's no calculation of the amped up time, we didn't need it anymore. And raw versus elemental, the thing is, I calculated it in the stream, and I want to say that power elemental switch axis with elemental switch X with a power file are 25% stronger than the best possible raw switch X in Sunbreak. Yes, and the best raw switch X Sunbreak, there are two: the Garen Golem switch X and the T-Rex switch X. The Garen Golem has the highest possible raw in the entire game, even more than the end boss. But yes, it has really bad sharpness, but it's still the best, one of the best KO switch X's you can get. And also another good KO switch X is the Rex Knasher with natural purple sharpness, and I think that's gonna be, yeah, very good KO switch X. Not as good as the elemental ones, but if you didn't have the free time to craft all the elemental ones, I think T-Rex and Garen Golem would be the choice. I also gonna tell you the weakest weapon of all. I didn't want to open the sheet, but if you open this sheet, you can see that Narga Kuga is the worst weapon of all, because it has the lowest raw in the entire Sunbreak game when the weapon is maxed out. So Narga Kuga is an absolute trap. I know all the other weapons use Narga Kuga weapons, but for Switch X it is the worst weapon of all. Reason? Yeah, Switch X needs element. Without element you can't get a decent damage, because of all the files that scales so good with element. Files scales extremely good with element. Also on bad hit zones. And what I also want to have to say, yeah, the next reason is we get this new counter. This new counter has a huge amount of fixed damage and non-crit damage. 2 times motion value with 90 fixed damage, which can't crit. Also with this ASD we have the finisher, the advanced slash file burst and all that other stuff that does fixed damage, can't crit, file burst also can't crit. So if you have a weapon in Sunbreak which has minus 20% affinity, that's not bad. The most important thing for Switch X you have to look in Sunbreak is the sharpness management. You have to get purple is the best you can get. White is not that good, but you have to always aim for purple sharpness, and then highest raw as possible. Raw and sharpness and file type. Yes, that's the most important thing. And no crit. Crit is interesting. I'm gonna prove that if you want to see this spoiler video, but I didn't want to click on it. Yes, okay. So just want to make it short. For KO Wax, it's Rex Knasher. And there was very surprising things I recognized in the stream. The most powerful Switch X for complete Sunbreak is the Xenograss Switch X. And remembers me back in Portable Third. Also there, the Xenograss Switch X was absolute meta Switch X. It was even better than all the Elemental or Raw Switch X at all. It was absolutely komplett OP gewesen. So for Thunder Preparation element in Sunbreak you definitely have to craft it as post Cloudburst. Rise it has 200 raw, so all the good power Switch X's which aren't meta Switch X in the base game has about 200 raw, which is pretty strong. Yes, in Rise it needed a lot of handicraft to get it worked very well, but yes, in Sunbreak it will get a great sharpness management and also very good yes, raw and that will be the strongest weapon in the entire game. And also what is so good on this weapon, it has 32 element, and power files tend to have less element, but this weapon still have a decent amount of element. And yes, this will absolutely the best switch X for Sunbreak meta, I think, regarding to the spreadsheet. Yes, also a very good switch X, and maybe in Sunbreak the only switch X with an elemental fire, which is good as the Narga X. Currently the best Thunder switch X in base rise. In Sunbreak this weapon will get a busted element. In base rise it has the highest element possible of all switch X of 43, and in Sunbreak it gets completely broken. But yes, it has a little bit of lack of raw, and sharpness management on the switch X is also really good. You only need 2 levels to get white sharpness, and elemental files always have to tend to have worse sharpness, but this is the best under elemental switch X, or in general the best switch X with elemental file in Sunbreak. You didn't really have to craft it, but if you have some problems with the counter, I highly recommend to craft the Abyssal Storm X. Yeah, so now to Ice Element. Regarding to the spreadsheet, the best Ice Switch X in Sunbreak will be the Kushlada Aura Switch X. Also, if you remove the Kushlada Aura Soul skill, it is still the best Ice Switch X. Because it has one of the best sharpness, or one of the best sharpness and the highest element in the entire game. Raw is not the highest maybe, but the element is completely broken. And for example, such a switch X can also outdamage a raw switch X with 210 raw, because the ice is completely broken. And if you use elemental attack 5 or 6, yes, it's gonna be completely crazy. It's like on the elemental fire level. Yes. So this will absolutely top tier. You have to craft a switch X. This is also in base rise the strongest ice switch X. There is also the Lunar Garon switch X, which I officially posted in my YouTube history. You can see all the 87 likes. This is not a max out Lunar Garon switch X, but it is very hard to say which of this switch X is better. Because also the Lunar Garon switch X gets a level 2 slot, which is pretty good, but very hard to say which one of these is better. But in my calculations, the Aura Siana got slightly more better results because of the higher element. You can see this is Sunbreak, and it only has 32 ice, and in base vanilla 41 ice. So maybe you can get the idea how strong or how the amount of ice attack will be in Sunbreak. It will be completely broken. So yes, this is the reason why maybe the Aura Siana will be the best one. Take all the data I say with a huge grain of salt. So now we come to water. I'm gonna close that. For water, meta was extremely complicated in base rise because it very depends on the hit zone value. There was a lot of different matchups. 3 switch X's were good. The Ludo Ashia were good for monsters with shitty water hit zone values like Magna Malo or Teostra, because it has a huge amount of raw. In Sunbreak you didn't need a Ludo Ashia, it isn't that strong anymore. Yes, but in base rise it was a very strong switch X. Also the Porting Slice was very good in base rise. Didn't saw it in a lot of runs, but for Tobi Kadachi was a good matchup. And also the Almudron, good matchup for Tobi Kadachi. Very high element. Tobi Kadachi has very high water hit zone values. Yes, these 3 switch X's were good in Rise, but now for Sunbreak Preparation you only need the Porting Slice from Mitsuzune, which has, yes, we doesn't have to look at the affinity, that isn't interesting for us. Water is a little bit low, but weapon has a very good sharpness management in Sunbreak. We didn't need a lot of handicraft, and it has a power fire. Yes, that will be maybe the best weapon, but there is also a weapon competing with this. This is the Delex Cleaver. The Delex Cleaver is mathematically the strongest water switch X since Sunbreak. It's very hard, it's competing with the Mitsuzune switch X. We will see how additional skills maybe we get with this weapon. You can also get to purple sharpness and Sunbreak with the Deluxe Cleaver, and this will make the weapon completely OP. I also want to say this weapon, depending on the spreadsheet, it will get a completely busted amount of raw. And this amount of raw it gets can compete with the Garangolm weapons, and the Garangolm weapon have the highest raw in the game. So you can see shitty water element, so this weapon would be a very good matchup for monsters like I explained with shitty hit zone values like from Magnamalo and Teostra. For this I think the choice would definitely be the Deluxe Cleaver, so make sure I highly recommend crafting the Deluxe Cleaver. It would be broken, I said. So now to the fire switch axis. I want to say Anjanath was meta in base rise, but now for preparation Anjanath isn't worth it because you can't handle the bad sharpness management. I know it has high raw, but in Sunbreak you have to play purple sharpness, otherwise you can't really catch up. You can play white in some cases, like with the Deluxe Cleaver, which will have in Sunbreak busted OP as hell if the data mine wasn't wrong. I'm not sure whether the data mine is right, but if it's right, the Deluxe Cleaver would be crazy as fuck. So yeah, I explained, Anjanath can't catch up with the sharpness management and it hasn't a power fire. So I highly recommend crafting the Rattler switch axe. I'm not sure whether this is the strongest fire switch axe, but this switch axe has a high amount of raw, great sharpness management, and also the element is pretty good for a power fire in base rise. 30 is very good for a power fire in base rise. Highly recommend. This wasn't a meta switch axe, but a meta switch axe if you have access to a god charm, then it was a meta switch axe in vanilla. And now to the second switch axe in Sunbreak. This switch axe will out damage the Rattler switch axe in specific conditions, depending on the hit zone value. You get the switch axe from the Aknosome, and the reason why the switch axe will be so good is every switch axe will catch up to rarity 10 in Sunbreak, and this switch axe stops with rarity 5. So that was very unfortunate. You can also see we have a level 2 slot, and this is a power fire, and this weapon will get a busted amount of raw in Sunbreak. The element is maybe not as good as the Rattler's axe, but the raw amount and the sharpness management would be absolutely great for the switch axe. And yes, it can in every way can compete with the Rattler switch axe later. Highly recommend to crafting this switch axe. We finally get some very good fire switch axe finally. There's also Magma Dron, but like I explained, maybe elemental files you can only use that for absolutely shitty raw hit zone values, and I think that isn't really the case in Sunbreak. Yeah, so now to the Dragon switch axes. I first of all can say Wildstruck's switch axe, you don't really need that switch axe anymore in Sunbreak, because the Wildstruck switch axe only has red and white. It never will reach purple sharpness, and white sharpness can't really catch up to purple in the comparison of damage output. So it was very weird in the data mining. It says it directly jumps from blue into purple, and I was very confused when I read this. And yes, so mathematically this may be one of the best axes, but I'm not really sure. I never see before that a switch axe jumps directly from blue into purple or what else, but because I remember in Vanilla Rise it has a tiny bit of white sharpness, so maybe the data mining did anything wrong, or doesn't, yes, maybe messed up a cell or so, maybe only reach a tiny bit of white sharpness. But yes, still this weapon has, you can see here, a huge amount of raw, very good raw, good sharpness management, bad element. But yes, this wanna be one of the best choices. And also a very good switch axe will be the Malzeno switch axe. also the Gormagala switch axis, but I didn't know whether they have an onboard skill where you get extra affinity like back in the old games. So I didn't want to really recommend you Dragon switch axis because it's very complicated, because we didn't know how the Malzeno weapon, whether it has a health regen or something similar, or the Gormagala if they have special effects, so I didn't want to really recommend any Dragon switch X, but I recommend with you forging the Abyssal Gale X, you can't make anything wrong. So yes, that's with, I didn't want to talk about status switch axis because I didn't want to make the video too long. That was about elemental ones. I just want to, yes, make a short conclusion. The Delex Cleaver and the Agnosom will maybe for the most players the only switch axis they have to craft now again, because they maybe crafted all the meta switch axis I showed you now before, and yes, really new now is the Delex Cleaver and the what I've said, Delex Cleaver and the Agnosom switch X, so they will be really good if the data mining isn't wrong. Did I forgot anything? Yes, I don't want to show you any data. Go to the spreadsheet at the link down below if you're interested, and yes, unfortunately, yes, element file isn't strong enough. Maybe all this video gets completely garbage and we can completely put this video in the trash can if they change the modifiers of the files. So currently power file is 115% boost for raw, and elemental file is 154% boost for elemental file. In Iceborne they also changed the modifiers, so I'm not really sure whether they change it. So if they change it, it's good, and this video is absolute trash. And if they not change it, yes, the power files will be meta again, except the Narga switch X, still a great switch X, okay, because it has busted element. Okay, thanks for watching. Sorry if I didn't show you any gameplay. I'm currently too lazy to show, start the game and all that stuff. I prefer just showing you any Google Sheets or so. That's a lot more comfortable for me. And yes, thanks for watching. I put a link in the video description down below. See you next time.